איראן מנסה לאיים, אבל העולם כבר לא מקשיב. בזמן שטראמפ ממשיך בקו התקיף שלו, בטהרן, כמנויים מנסה לשדר כוח, אבל זה לא מצליח. העולם רואה שהם חלשים והם מובסים והם מושפלים. תנו לייק, תשתפו את הסרטון, ואתם חייבים לראות עד הסוף.
But first, let's go live to Trey Yingst in Tel Aviv with the latest from the ground. Trey.
Kaylee, good afternoon. Overnight, Iran launched around 30 ballistic missiles into Israel. The vast majority were intercepted by air defense systems. Here's what it looked like as efforts were made to shoot down those incoming missiles. Right now, there are ballistic missiles being fired at Israel's second largest city of Tel Aviv. Currently, missile defense systems are working to shoot down the incoming fire. We are going to take some cover here as this unfolds. You can see in the distance interceptor rounds coming off, trying to shoot down.
The tripod.
Pull it off the tripod. And let's move inside. The flash there in the sky, explosions overhead. And again, this is the third barrage. These barrages are getting smaller, prompting Israel's Home Front Command to reduce restrictions for civilians here. Work will resume for businesses that have shelters, but schools will remain closed. As the war enters its sixth day, Iran's supreme leader made his first televised remarks since the new conflict began, directly contradicting President Trump's calls for an unconditional surrender. The Iranian nation stands firm against the imposed war, the Ayatollah says, as it has stood so far, and stands firm against the imposed peace. The Iranian nation will not surrender to anyone in the face of imposition. With no end in sight, Israel is ramping up airstrikes against Iran, targeting dozens of new positions overnight. Fox News has learned new details about a strike earlier in the week that took out IRGC Major General Ali Shamani. An Israeli official says that on Monday night, a secret compound located in a mountain outside of Tehran was targeted, killing dozens of IRGC operatives, among them several senior commanders who fled from the location to another hideout in Tehran. This source says the commanders were tracked to the new location and then taken out. As the war continues, the big question here is whether or not the United States will get directly involved in the fight, launching strikes of its own against Iran.
Well, back here at home, President Trump was asked about the U.S. potentially entering the conflict with a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Here's how he responded.
You don't seriously think I'm going to answer that question? Will you strike the Iranian nuclear component? And what time exactly, sir? Sir, would you strike it? Would you please inform us so we can be there and watch? I mean, you don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before? All this death and destruction. Why didn't you negotiate? I said to the people, why didn't you negotiate with me 2 weeks ago? You could have done fine.
It's a great question. Well, the president also reiterated exactly what he wants from the Iranian regime.
But is there anybody here that said it would be okay to have a hostile, very, zealots really, but to have a hostile country have a nuclear weapon that could destroy 25 miles, but much more than that, could destroy other nations just by the breeze blowing the dust. That dust blows to other nations and they get decimated. This is just not a threat you can have. And we've been threatened by Iran for many years, and we cannot let Iran get a nuclear weapon. I've been saying it for a long time, and I mean it more now than I ever meant it. Two very simple words, a very simple, unconditional surrender. That means I've had it. Okay, I've had it, I give up, no more. Then we go blow up all the all the nuclear stuff that's all over the place there. No, they had bad intentions. For 40 years they've been saying death to America, death to Israel, death to anybody else that they didn't like. They were bullies. They were schoolyard bullies. And now they're not bullies anymore.
There's this very unique juxtaposition, Joey, and I want to put it up. President Trump mentioned the two words. He put up these two words in all caps. It's President Trump, unconditional surrender. I've been following what this so-called supreme leader has been saying, and he seemed to directly address this. Here's what he said. Americans must know that the Iranian nation will not surrender. You know, Joey, in my years studying international relations, when you're talking about nuclear war, one of the calculuses is having rational state actors on the other end who have a limiting principle. That limiting principle is self-preservation. I'm not sure when you're dealing with fanaticism, that limiting principle is there, which underscores why Iran can never have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, I think I struggle to find the specifics here of what unconditional surrender means, because my instinct is, looking at President Trump through the entire election and his rhetoric all along, is that he's meaning unconditional surrender of your nuclear program. But we've also seen him be more open to this idea that they should go into exile, or that Israel is going to see this war to its end. It's my belief that Israel doesn't believe that an Iran exists under this regime that doesn't pursue nuclear weapons and continue to fund terrorist organizations. So what incentive does Israel have to not go to the end? In the end, meaning regime change. But President Trump has painted himself and really backed it up as an anti-regime change president. Hey, they're all bad. I'm not going to decide who's in power. I'm going to make sure they can't hurt us. And I think this is in line with that. I think if President Trump decided today, let me back up. I think President Trump is not indecisive in this moment. I don't think he's trying to figure it out. I think there are markers he's looking for. I don't know if that's reassurance from other countries to not get involved, or if it's a specific thing from Iran, or if it's a specific set of intelligence that he's looking for. But I believe he knows if this, then that. And that's what he's following through with.
Yeah, and there are several different courses that can be pursued. You know, regime change doesn't need to be a part of it. It can be a limited precision strike and assistance with Israel as they try to take out Fordo. This happened last night. I want to play this. This is Barak Ravid. We highlighted some of his reporting yesterday. Here's what he is hearing from Israeli officials.
At least from what I hear from Israeli officials, the overall impression on the Israeli side is that a U.S. strike on Iran is not an if, it's a when. And it's not, and when they say when, it's not next year. It's something that is much closer. And the feeling on the Israeli side is that Trump has made a decision to join the war, and it's just a matter of time until it happens.
At the same time, Harris, there's this reporting from the Wall Street Journal. Israel has a plan for Fordo, that's the nuclear plant that they would need help from the U.S. with, and they have the ability to carry it out on its own, a senior Israeli military official told the Wall Street Journal without elaborating. So a lot of pieces, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so I had on Brett Velikovich, who is a contributor with us now, but we know him because he's former Army Special Ops and intel for the military. And one of the things he said was the timing is so critical right now, Joey. Like that, there's a really small window where, as the president said, and I put this in quotes, we control, I would assume that's U.S. and Israel control the airspace of Iran. That may not exist for any long period of time that we would know about, that anybody could guess. I'm still asking the question. Something's giving them some kind of bravado. Is it, what don't we know?
Yeah. Talking about that facility and Israel having a plan, the U.S. plan would be to take a giant bomb and drop it, because our president, Secretary of Defense understand that our people don't want troops on the ground. That doesn't mean that's the only option for Israel.
Yeah, they might have another option. Emily, I also want to underscore, the New York Times is reporting that Iran's preparing missiles for possible retaliatory strikes on U.S. bases, officials say. We would expect that to be part of their plan. I just want to highlight, though, and we've talked about this, going back over time, Iran has killed many Americans. Here's a number, and we've investigated this with our brain room, cross-check with Pentagon numbers. 603 troops in Iraq died at the hands of Iranian proxies. They have killed Americans for years and years and years, and they will continue to.
And that's why, in part, the very first statement by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was, do not attack any U.S. troops, drawing that line clear. I'll say that my sources in Tel Aviv believe very strongly that the United States is collaborating on a much deeper, more fundamental level with Israel than we might be hearing publicly. And I think the whole point is that there's different gradations, and we've talked about that. There's different gradations, and there's a spectrum to everything, to the concept of what the definition of interventionism is, to the definition of how far do we see this, right, and potentially the toppling of the Islamic Republic. Well, what does that look like? And I think that the primary questions we should be asking is, what next? Not necessarily in this moment, but what next if we don't do anything? And to me, that's the strongest answer for doing nothing, is emboldening and furthering our enemy's interests so that that tragic number of 603 doesn't escalate, because we know it's going to include as well Israelis. And we see that, by the way, in just the last few days of the campaign. We see exactly where Iran's mindset is, which is taking the largest metropolis areas of Israel and trying to levy the biggest destruction on those. That's completely opposite from the surgical precision levied by Israel, our allies, and ourselves. We've talked about the silence by the neighboring countries. I think a lot of people are waiting and hoping that Israel finishes this job. But I think the whole point is we have elected this particular commander-in-chief to represent our interests. And with that, the final goal of peace through strength includes the eradication of the nuclear program, and by that, the definition of success, and also the deterrent so that Iran doesn't simply rear its ugly head the day after and continue their malign behavior, which has been a wretched source of terror throughout the globe.
Cheryl, we were just looking at images of Tehran, and you can see Israel and the attacks that they're waging. Much of Tehran under blackout right now. Part of that might be because the regime doesn't want people to see what is going on and the wreckage there as you're looking at it. Some of it's cyber attacks from Israel.
Well, and also to remember that the regime actually turned off the internet the day that the strikes began, when this war began last week. But, you know, the war isn't just about missiles and explosions. War can also be financial war. And this morning, the Predatory Sparrow hacker group, this is a pro-Israel crypto hacker group, they basically destroyed $90 million in cryptocurrency from Iran at their crypto exchange. What the Iranians do is that's how they fund the proxies, the Houthis, Hamas. Yeah. It's through cryptocurrency. Well, the Israelis, this pro-Israel hacker group went after them. That's one issue. The other is that remember that Iran exports, or they were exporting, about 3.3 million barrels of oil per day through the Strait of Hormuz. The question mark is now, do they try to shut down the Strait of Hormuz? No, they don't, because they're exporting to China, and they don't want to cut off that financial lifeline. Sanctions have not been effective against the Iranians. We've been talking about this for years. And the Ayatollahs have been ineffective for the Iranians for 40 years. And I think the time is now.
Yeah, and that window could be shorter than we know. You mentioned, Joey, about what happens if we don't act. And I think, Emily, you alluded to it, too. I think Israel does what you said. They keep going.
Yeah, they keep going and make the world safer for